She was a normal woman who lived a quiet life, placing her trust in God and praying daily for her little family. But no one could have imagined that someone so ordinary would be chosen by Jesus Christ to witness the terrifying events that are about to unfold upon humanity. In the moment her soul left her body, God allowed her to see the Third World War and the collapse of the world as we know it. So what exactly did she see? And when will it happen? Watch until the end of the video, because the message Jesus gave her might be a warning meant specifically for you before it's too late. If something inside your heart has just been stirred, leave a comment below and share the very first emotion you felt, whether it was fear, gratitude, or a sense of awakening. When you write it down, you're opening your heart to receive His light. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to Eternal Bible Stories, where real testimonies are shared to awaken faith and bring light to the soul in a world slowly being swallowed by darkness. Now, here is her testimony. My name is Mikasa. I was born into a Japanese-American family in California, and I grew up between two worlds. On one side, the Asian values of silence and discipline, and on the other, the Christian faith my mother passed down to me through nightly Bible readings. After I got married, my husband and I moved to Miami, Florida, a place of sunshine, ocean breezes, and a small community where I found peace through teaching traditional ink painting and pottery. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl, both gentle and well-behaved. I didn't have a grand career, nor did I seek fame. My life was simple and steady, revolving around the kitchen, my art studio, our local church, and quiet moments of prayer. I believed in God, but it was the kind of gentle faith, like a morning breeze, quiet and unassuming. I never thought God needed to reveal anything big to someone as ordinary as me. But I was wrong. One afternoon in August of 1987, while my husband took the kids to the park to ride bikes, I stayed home to finish some crafts for the weekend market. Everything seemed so ordinary until something supernatural happened right there in my little kitchen. And from that very moment, my quiet life was changed forever. It was a Sunday, August 9th, 1987, a day that seemed as peaceful as any other in my life. My husband took our children to the park to ride their bikes, and afterward he planned to visit his mother for dinner. I stayed home alone, taking advantage of the quiet to finish some handmade crafts for the weekend market, and enjoying a rare moment of solitude in our familiar home. Everything unfolded slowly and predictably, yet for some unknown reason, my heart felt restless, as though something unseen was quietly drawing near. As I entered the kitchen, I noticed that my husband had left a mess of tools scattered on the counter, and I immediately felt annoyed. "He made a mess again," I muttered, and began tidying up. I was still bent over, picking up the clutter he had left on the kitchen counter, when suddenly I froze. Right there, in the doorway between the kitchen and the hallway, stood a man looking directly at me. No sound, no warning. He was just there, as if he had been standing there for a long time without me ever noticing. He wore a pure white robe, made of a fabric unlike anything I had ever seen. It didn't reflect light like silk, nor was it stiff like cotton. It looked as though it had been woven from light itself and from peace. Around his waist was a simple golden sash, not decorative like jewelry, but symbolic, humble yet full of majesty. His hair was gently curled, shoulder-length, a deep brown with a faint radiance surrounding it. His face, no, I can't describe it as handsome in the way people usually mean. It was holy. His eyes were gentle, but so profoundly deep that I felt as if he could see into thoughts I hadn't yet admitted even to myself. He smiled at me. It wasn't the kind of polite smile from a stranger, nor was it the familiar type of smile used in greetings. It was a smile that made me feel loved understood and forgiven, all within a single gaze. I stared at him, almost forgetting what I was doing, but what shocked me the most was I couldn't see his feet. There was no shadow of his feet, no footsteps, no sound at all. He wasn't standing, he was hovering. His entire body floated gently in the air, unaffected by gravity. Yet strangely, that didn't scare me. On the contrary, I felt an odd sense of peace rising within me, as if I had just been wrapped in an invisible blanket made from the presence of heaven itself. I couldn't say a word, nor did I feel the need to ask who he was. Deep within my consciousness, I knew I had just encountered Jesus Christ. And the moment that thought reached my mind, he disappeared, gently, without a sound, like light withdrawing from a room. But the feeling he left behind did not vanish. It remained in every breath, every heartbeat, and even in the trembling of my soul. I jolted awake. The kitchen was completely empty. The gaze of the man in the white robe had disappeared as if he had never existed. Everything was eerily still. There were no footsteps, no car sounds outside the gate. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I looked around the house. There was no husband, no children, no one else. Only me. A thought suddenly flashed through my mind. Maybe there was a stranger inside the house. I immediately rushed to check all the doors, the front door, the back door, and all the windows. I opened all the kitchen cabinets, looked under the table, under the chairs. I ran upstairs, checking every room, every closet, under every bed. The house remained empty, disturbingly silent. There was no sound, and I was the only person there. There were no signs of anything unusual, but something still felt off. I couldn't explain the feeling. It was as if someone or something was watching me from an invisible place. It wasn't a thief, it wasn't a living person, it was a presence, faint but impossible to ignore. I returned to the bedroom, my heart still pounding, but it wasn't out of fear. It was because of an indescribable feeling, as if my soul was being called by name. And then a sudden thought gripped my mind tightly. Maybe God is about to call me. I didn't understand why that thought came to me. I was healthy, not sick, without a single symptom. But that thought didn't come from logic. It came from somewhere deeper. A strange inner prompting, as if someone was trying to awaken my soul from a long sleep. I turned on the TV to calm my mind, randomly choosing a movie to chase away the unease. But I couldn't focus. My thoughts seemed to drift elsewhere, slipping away from the physical world. And then it came. A massive, pure and radiant beam of light suddenly appeared just outside the bedroom window. I held my breath, my entire body frozen. At the same time, a female voice rang out, firm, authoritative, and unlike anything human. "We have come to find you." I had no time to react before a wave of cold swept down my spine, and then I knew I was no longer in my body. My soul had begun a journey I never could have imagined. I remember lying on the couch watching TV for about an hour and a half. I don't know why, but suddenly I felt my husband's presence in the house. I didn't hear a car, nor the sound of the door opening, but I just knew they had returned. I thought to myself, good, they're home, and let myself sink into that feeling of comfort. But that peace only lasted a few short seconds, because right then a radiant light, so stunningly beautiful it took my breath away, approached the window of my bedroom. And then a female voice, strong, majestic, rang out clearly in my mind. "We are coming, we are here to find you." My body froze. At the same time, I somehow knew that my husband was bringing the kids to their rooms. He was just about to enter mine. But before his hand could even touch the doorknob, I had already left my body. I didn't understand what was happening. My soul had separated from my physical body, and I saw myself trying to re-enter it, but it didn't work. My body lay motionless, cold as stone, while I drifted like a lost spirit trapped between two worlds. The sphere of light continued to move into the room through the window, growing closer and closer. I felt my body becoming heavier, as if an invisible force was pressing me down. Unable to move, unable to scream, but my mind was fully conscious. I rushed out to the hallway where my husband was standing. I stood right next to him, looked at him, spoke to him, screamed at him, but he didn't see me, didn't hear me. I turned back to the bedroom and looked at my lifeless body still lying there. A wave of terror surged through me, not just because I was frozen, but because I was burning from within, like fire rushing through my veins with no way out. When my husband finally opened the door and stepped in, the light was still there. I tried to speak to him, but nothing came out. He simply bent over and looked at me in silence. Then he turned away. He walked down to the kitchen. And I remained there, trapped inside my own body. I tried to shake, to move, to struggle, but all of it was in vain. My soul left my body once more and followed him downstairs. But when I reached the staircase, I couldn't go any further. I couldn't step down. It was as if an invisible boundary blocked my path. I returned to the bedroom. The light was now right outside the window, as if waiting for me to step into it. It was a beauty beyond words, yet it carried a sense of danger within its invitation. I sensed that the housemaid had arrived, carrying my little daughter who was still sound asleep. I called out to her, but she didn't hear me. She walked right past me, as if I didn't exist. I entered my daughter's room, gently stroked her hair, whispered words of love, and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, then drifted back into sleep. I kept moving, trying to get downstairs, trying to touch someone. I went into my son's room, then the maid's room. I even screamed, struck the maid hard, begged her, "Please, I think they're coming to take me. Please, help me." But no one reacted. I didn't even know how I passed through the doors. They had never opened, yet I was still inside the rooms. No matter how loudly I yelled, no matter how hard I cried, I remained invisible. I returned to look at my body, lying there like a lifeless shell. I tried to re-enter it, but nothing changed. I was still frozen. Eventually, I stood at the top of the stairs, looked down, and saw straight through the wall. From there, I could see the kitchen. My husband sitting there eating cookies with cheese and cold cuts, drinking a full glass of milk. I wanted to scream, to lose my mind. "Why aren't you helping me? They're coming to take me and all you care about is eating." But he couldn't hear me. I realized no one could help me, except myself. I made the decision to return to my body. The moment I did, an intense heat surged into me. My body felt as heavy as lead, as if the bed were collapsing into the floor beneath it, unable to bear the weight. The light began to retreat, and my husband walked into the room. He approached, looked at me, and I tried again to speak, "Help me," but he still couldn't hear. He knelt down, staring at me intently. I struck him, but nothing made contact. He didn't see me, didn't feel me, didn't react. He only tilted his head slightly. I began to recite the Lord's Prayer. Even though I had no mouth, no breath, yet the prayer echoed within my soul. When I reached the words, "Give us this day our daily bread," suddenly I returned. My eyes opened, and at the same moment my heart made a chilling sound, like a jammed engine that suddenly kicked back into motion. I lifted my head, exhausted but furious. "Are you crazy? They almost took me through the window, and you were just sitting there eating like nothing happened. Why didn't you help me?" I continued, still struggling to breathe. "I'm burning up. Come with me to the bathroom. I don't want to be alone." He touched me and recoiled, realizing I was drenched in sweat, yet my body was cold as ice. He handed me a glass of water. I drank it, then poured the rest over my head to wake myself up. I dragged myself into the bathroom, turned on the faucet. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't dare. I was afraid that if I fell asleep they would come back, and next time I might not return. That night I didn't close my eyes. I sat alone, restless through the night, because deep inside I knew something far greater was coming. I was in Miami, and it was an ordinary evening like any other. The date was November 12th, 2011. It was around 9 p.m. and I was quietly sitting, writing and reading emails. Everything seemed completely normal, but for some reason I suddenly felt an unusual sense of boredom and emptiness. About 3 minutes before 10 p.m., I stood up and said to my husband, "Good night, I'm going to bed. I'm just so tired of everything." He looked at me with surprise. "Now? It's still early. I usually don't go to sleep until midnight or later." I simply replied, "No, I'm done for today, I'm going to bed," and walked into the room. I lay down in my usual position, on my back, arms resting by my sides. Not long after, I drifted off into sleep, or at least I thought I had. But this time it wasn't a dream. I was pulled straight out of my body and instantly appeared in a place beyond imagination, the middle of what seemed like World War III. I didn't know whether I was witnessing the present, the future, or a divine warning, but what I saw was not something any human could fabricate. It went beyond imagination, beyond anything any film or book had ever portrayed about war. The weapons were strange and terrifying. They didn't resemble any kind of weapon I had ever seen. They didn't fire bullets. They emitted beams of energy that tore through everything. The city was shredded apart, roads were broken, buildings collapsed, children lay scattered, animals screamed, and trees burned down to ash. Even the water had turned into a murky, toxic substance. I felt it clearly. Humanity was not just dying physically, it was rotting spiritually, and I knew I had died in that vision. Then suddenly I was pulled back into my body, as if released from a dark nightmare. But instead of fleeing from it, I heard a voice rise within me. "You must go back. You have to see more." And once again I left my body, diving straight back into the scene of devastation. I saw wounded people lying everywhere, the sky echoing with cries of sorrow, and the destruction was endless. There was no hope. Suddenly I was pulled back into my body, and this time the pain hit me like a tidal wave. It felt as if my entire lower jaw had just been violently ripped out. It was excruciating, numbing. At the same moment, my neck felt like it was being stretched tight by an invisible cord pulling between my shoulders. Then came the sensation of a heavy strap wrapping from my shoulders down to the top of my chest, pressing so hard I couldn't breathe. I was completely frozen, utterly unable to move, left with nothing but a sharp, cold awareness. I knew my husband was lying beside me, but I couldn't call out to him. I left my body once again, and this time I flew, so fast that even I was stunned by it, and then I was standing before the Lord. There was no thunder, no clouds, no radiant halo of light, just a presence, so magnificent, so vast, that it took my breath away. I didn't beg, I explained, I told him I still had things to do, that it wasn't time yet, and then, boom! I was pulled straight back into my body, with a force so powerful it echoed like an explosion inside my soul. Strangely, this time I didn't feel pain. A profound peace blanketed me. But I still couldn't move. Once again I stood before the Lord, and again I said, "I'm still alive, but I can't move." And again, boom! I was returned. But this time the sensation of being constricted by that invisible strap was even stronger, not painful, but unmistakably real. It began as a subtle shift, something stirring deep inside my body. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it, a kind of insertion, as if an object the size of a human foot was passing through me. It started in my right forearm, moved through my chest, and exited through my left arm. It wasn't imagined, I saw it. a translucent device filled with glittering pinpoints of light, like tiny crystals suspended in glass. There was no pain, but there was energy, waves of it, as though an invisible force had opened a new channel inside me. I could hear a deep, resonant whoosh, like a massive turbine spinning to life, and I felt vibrations radiating from within, like seismic lines dancing across a giant page that surrounded me. And then, something miraculous happened. I moved. Just one finger, my right pinky, but it was enough. To most, it might seem like nothing, but to me it was a miracle. That slight motion told me I was still alive. I was still here. My body was frozen and heavy, like stone, but my consciousness was crystal clear. I reached instinctively toward my husband. When the tip of my finger brushed his skin, he jolted upright like he'd been electrocuted. His eyes widened in shock. "What was that?" he gasped. "Is there a lizard in the bed?" He scrambled to turn on the light. Meanwhile, I gritted my teeth, barely able to speak, and pushed out the words, "Call an ambulance, now." He heard me, finally, and he moved. While he called 911, I forced myself to sit up, then stand. I wasn't moving like myself, more like a machine, stiff and mechanical. Each step was deliberate, robotic. I shuffled slowly toward the living room, jaw clenched, speaking through nearly locked teeth. "I'm not in pain, but I can't move." My limbs were rigid, my body like a frozen sculpture, but my mind, my soul, was fully awake. "Tell them it's a heart attack," I whispered. He did exactly that. When the paramedics arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was still disconnected, still foreign to myself, but I could speak. "Who needs help?" they asked. "Me," I said. "Are you in pain?" they continued. I shook my head. There was no pain, just an eerie coldness inside me, a sensation that reached into my soul. Yet my body felt nothing. They checked my vitals, all normal. A contradiction I couldn't explain. I felt like a corpse that had somehow retained its voice. "Are you okay?" they asked again. I said, "Yes, but I'm not myself." They asked if I could walk to the ambulance. I nodded. I had to. Our vehicles were blocking the path. If they brought the stretcher, it would take too long. So I pushed myself 3 steps down, 6 more across the driveway. Each step felt like the weight of the entire world pressed against me. When I reached the stretcher, I laid down carefully, afraid that even one wrong movement would fracture whatever was holding me together. Inside the ambulance, a medic struggled to find a vein in my right arm. 6 attempts, still no success. I turned to her, tried to smile, and whispered, "I donate blood often, but they always have trouble the first time." Another medic clipped an oxygen monitor to my finger. "Are you allergic to aspirin?" he asked. I shook my head. Then came a small cup with 3 baby aspirin. I took them. "Are you on any medication?" they asked. I answered truthfully, "I don't have a thyroid. It was destroyed by radiation years ago." And then, suddenly, I felt something rise inside me. It was dark, thick, almost solid. I turned my head to the left and vomited it out. A gelatinous mass, dark red or nearly black, like a clot of congealed wine or dead tissue. At that exact moment, my soul lifted. I left my body. Weightless, I sat up and floated out of the ambulance like a broken-winged bird escaping its cage. I soared upward, higher and higher. Someone in the ambulance said, "Take off her socks." I wanted to stay, but I knew I no longer belonged there. I was drifting inside a giant dome of soft, peach-colored light. Far in the distance I saw it, a city, glowing, beautiful, a place beyond description. I looked back one last time, saw my body on the stretcher, the other emergency vehicle behind us, and even my husband in our car further back. But none of it mattered anymore. I wanted only to fly toward that city. Voices began calling my name, many voices, but I didn't stop. I saw myself in the hospital, tubes in my face, heard people speaking, but my soul continued onward. I saw my husband talking to a man in a white shirt and tie, standing in an office far from where I was. Around my stretcher were dozens of people, but I felt no attachment. I kept flying. Then I heard the sound of clashing metal, surgical tools perhaps. I felt every vibration deep in my chest. I tried to speak to my husband in thought, tell them I don't have a thyroid, I'm on synthetic hormones. The man asked my husband, "Do you know what medication she takes?" He said he couldn't remember. I screamed the answer, but no one could hear. I tried to grab his hand. My hand passed right through. "Please," I begged, "say it for me." And then he did, word for word, and the man wrote it down. That's when I realized I was still connected. Somehow between this world and the next, something still held me here. I kept flying, as if my entire soul had merged with a gentle, refreshing wind that carried me toward the radiant city ahead. That city was drawing closer and closer. Its domes shimmered as if they were made of pure light, and its roads curved gracefully between transparent towers, so beautiful that my heart tightened with longing, as if I had known this place before, as if my soul had belonged there for eternity. I no longer thought about my body. I no longer thought about pain or illness. I had only one desire left, to touch the gates of that heavenly city. But then, a massive peach-colored, coral-like block suddenly fell in front of me. It wasn't made of matter, yet it had weight. I had to veer around it to continue my journey. As I ascended, another block dropped down, this time diagonally, as if it were deliberately trying to block me. No one said a word, but I understood. I was being tested. 5 times it happened. Each block was larger, more difficult to bypass, yet, after each one, the city drew a little closer, the light shone a little brighter, and my heart swelled with even greater hope. Just as I was about to reach the border of that city, just one more step, an overwhelming voice rang out. It wasn't an ordinary voice. It was a mighty sound, thunderous like lightning tearing through the sky, yet it called my name with clarity and authority. My soul trembled. I couldn't resist. A terrifying force, like a massive turbine, appeared and pulled me back at a speed I couldn't comprehend. I turned my head, trying to keep my eyes fixed on the city, but my soul's form was already being dragged backward, not in pain, but in heaviness and helplessness. As I was being pulled back, I saw the moon shining brilliantly, and just above it there was a massive translucent being, like a giant jellyfish made of light. Its head hovered over the moon, while its 2 legs anchored the earth. The sight took my breath away. I had never seen anything so majestic. It felt like a living entity that governed the balance between the realms of heaven. I no longer saw the medical staff who had once surrounded my body. Instead, I saw different figures, people moving my body into another room. I saw my husband sitting not far away. He sat quietly, head bowed, his eyes red with tears, and that gaze pierced through my chest like a blade. He didn't know I was looking at him. He didn't know I was still here, standing on the edge between life and death, between light and the earthly world. Then I saw them place my body onto a bed in a white, spotless room. There were no more tubes in my throat. I opened my eyes. Everything was still and quiet. "What is happening?" I asked. But I wasn't panicked. I wasn't afraid. Inside me was a strange peace, a peace that didn't come from medicine, but from something far more sacred. A nurse nearby gently said, "Ma'am, you must not sit up." Then she called for the doctor. When he entered, I recognized him instantly. He was one of the people I had seen standing around me when my soul was still floating above the emergency stretcher. He asked, "Ma'am, how are you feeling? Are you in pain?" I smiled softly, my eyes still wet from the city I had almost entered. "Not at all," I said calmly. He nodded and replied, "We placed a net and a stent in your heart. You must not move because your femoral artery had been blocked." I nodded slowly, looking at him with bright eyes, and said, "Yes, I've seen it." They gave me fluids in the intensive care unit. The next day, they let me sit up for the first time. My body no longer felt like it was mine. Lighter, clearer, and carrying a secret that no words could express. I had been shown something, a divine invitation, a glimpse of the city of eternal life. One day I will return to that city. Next time I will walk through its gates, and I hope you'll be there with me. Twice I came close to death. Twice I saw heaven, and twice the Lord brought me back to earth, not because I was worthy, but because I needed to tell what I had seen. Those were the words Mikasa shared personally with us here at Eternal Bible Stories. What you've just heard is a true testimony, not a story made to shock, nor a fleeting dream during a moment of delirium. This is a real spiritual journey, experienced by an ordinary woman chosen by God to witness the horrors that may soon come upon the world and the beauty beyond human understanding. The heavenly city. And if you're still watching at this very moment, I don't believe it's by accident. Maybe God is knocking on the door of your heart just as he once knocked on hers. This story isn't just a testimony. It may be a wake-up call, a gentle reminder that time is short and you need to be ready. I want to invite you to take a quiet moment to reflect. If something inside you has been stirred, leave a comment below as a way of opening your heart to receive God's blessing. And we'd truly love to know, where are you watching from? What do you feel happening inside your spirit right now? And if you'd like to continue walking alongside these real stories, testimonies that shake the soul, please subscribe to Eternal Bible Stories. We are here to share what the world is afraid to say, but what your soul needs to hear. God bless you.